This was actually suggested by one of our colleagues about the work environment and making the work environment a more positive place. And I think all of us want to work in a fun, positive work environment. Unfortunately, some of us haven't, or some of us are being currently challenged. And I guess there's two different ways that you can approach this today. You may be in a work environment which really you have no control over, because somebody else is in charge, okay? So it's what do I know what can I see and identify that contributes to that work environment, and how can I help to make that work environment better, okay? Or you may be in a position where you have influence and you have control over the people that you work with. All of us have some control, whether it's one student worker or it's an office of 20 or 30 staff members. So we may have a small amount of influence or a large amount of influence, but I think at least we're going to be able to identify what contributes to a positive work environment, okay? And we're going to talk about that today. So how do we build community? How do we make an environment where people enjoy coming to work? And I guess I want to start off by just asking y'all, I'd like to go around and you tell your name and your department so everybody can kind of get to know each other, especially since we're a small group. But what is a component, or what do you think helps to create a positive work environment? What is something that you would say, this is something that I think matters when it comes to working in a positive work environment? Okay, so just having manners with one another. And that's not just to students, that's to everybody.
Manners are about
believing in your people. Believing in your people and then allowing them to do their stuff. And we're going to talk about that too. That's great. So seeing the big picture and kind of letting people know what their daily contribution is how that's contributing to the overall picture.
We had once.
Building camaraderie, building relationships, and that takes time. You have to be intentional with that. It doesn't just happen. And it's not just walking by someone. Sometimes it's just forcing ourselves to look up from our desk to say something. And I'm convicted, but I was preparing this material and I thought, ugh, because there are times when I am just so focused on what I'm doing that I'm like, I really don't want to talk right now, you know? But I need to take those breaks to be intentional and to make sure that I validate people. Otherwise, you know, they could feel less than. So that's a good point, okay? And recognition is huge. To bring that to everybody's attention and then pat people on the back and verbalize appreciation for that. Y'all pointed out a number of things that we're going to talk about, and some of these things you're going to read and you're going to think, well, that's pretty self-explanatory, but sadly, a lot of these things don't happen in a work environment, and that's when you kind of stand back and go, wait a minute. So what I want you to do now is to think about your work environment, and nobody's going to see this. I want to be very careful and respectful of where you're coming from, because I know all of us have different types of work environments, but I'd like you to do the assessment. First of all, before you ever take a job, really do investigation about the culture of that particular office. Like on this campus, I'm amazed with how some people will come into my office and shut the door, and maybe they worked in one part of the campus and then they were transferred because it was a promotion and now they're somewhere else and they're like, I feel like I'm on a different campus. And what people forget is that every office on this campus has a different culture. And norms, different norms for that office, whether it's arrival and departure times, how you take sick leave, how you take comp, how you work together versus complete autonomy. So one thing is just, you know, in the future, if you're looking at a position, really research and make sure that you're aware of what the culture of that office or company is. And then just be a positive person as much as possible. Especially if you're in a challenging work environment. One thing I tell people, work out, get out, even if it's just at lunch, and taking a walk. That will help you kind of separate yourself from that negativity in that work environment. Listen to music. What kinds of things that you can do to help you take care of yourself, especially if you're not being taken care of by a positive manager. Take responsibility. One thing I always tell people when they're sharing complaints about where they're at is I always tell people that the motive that there's no I in team is not right. You know, you always hear that, there's no I in team, it's us. Well, the I in team is that I can complain and I can say I have concerns about the work environment, but I also can try to present solutions on changing that. So part of the I in a team is I'm assuming some responsibility for this work environment and what I have control of, what I can do, I'm going to do and fill in the blank. So assume responsibility for what you do. What I always tell people is when you're in a work environment, identify what you have control over and identify what you have no control over. And focus on what you have control over. Do the best of your ability in that area. And certainly you make suggestions on what you don't have control over, but don't allow that to pull you down. And there's a lot of things on this canvas we have no control over. Okay, don't spend all your energy on that. You know, once again, focus on what you do have control over. So take responsibility for what you have control over. Communicate with your manager. What I really would ask you to do today is identify 2 things that you think would help your current work environment. 2 things. And go to your manager about them. Say, you know what, I went to this seminar and I was just thinking about our work environment and I just want to have a conversation about 2 areas. And start there and see if that makes a difference. Hopefully it will. You're going to at least feel better about yourself that you communicated those concerns and that you were trying to make change in that work environment, okay? 3 choices if you work in a negative work environment or an environment with resistance, okay? 3 choices. Number 1, stay and be a team player and focus on what you can control, what you can do, okay? That's one of your choices. So you stay, you're a team player, and you just put all that energy in what you have influence or impact over, okay? The second choice that you have is to stay and be bitter and frustrated. And in reality, I mean, that's reality for a lot of people because of what you're talking about, Penny. I've tried to communicate. This person is not receptive. This person, it's my way or no way. And in reality is you try, you keep trying, but that leads to the 3rd step, you leave. I mean, you either stay and you say, I've just come to the realization that all I can really do is focus on what I have control over. Or you stay and you continue to get frustrated and upset and you keep trying, you get nowhere. Or you come to the place where you just say, you know what, at any given time when I'm able, bless you, I'm just going to walk away from this. Because I've made those attempts, the person is not responding to me, because reality is some people won't. They are just determined, they're dogmatic, and it's unfortunate because it's their loss as well as their team's loss. But reality is that happens. Oh yeah, a lot of it's based on insecurity because they're afraid.
It's just a bad match sometimes.
Yeah.
Not anyone at fault, just a bad match.
And I will tell you, and this is something that I have been working on for 3 years, is a proposal to HR on an ongoing manager supervisory training program, because we have lots of managers that have either been managers forever or they've been put in a position just because of timing or that have no clue how to be a manager or a supervisor. We are in the process of trying to make that happen to where managers, especially the ones that need to hear this, are hearing this. Because most of the time the people that come to these are the people that already get it. You know? But it gets down to, you've got to come to a place where if you're dealing with that, you just have to say, you know what, I've made these attempts and now I have to choose. Do I stay or do I go? One thing, and I like what Mary said, is you kind of start with baby steps and you've got to build a relationship, and the thing is, especially if you're approaching somebody who's your, supervisor, the whole area of lack of security, you've got to be careful in how you approach them, and it's like, I went to this seminar, heard some great things. Can we talk about this at our next staff meeting? Here's some handouts, and just trying to be subtle and go in baby steps and hope that they'll respond to that, but not all of them will. Let me go through a few things, and then I want us to do this gorilla exercise because I really like it. I want to give you just quickly some components. These are things that help build a positive work environment. So you can fill in the blanks. It's another white handout that you had, and it says components of a positive work environment. And these are 10 suggestions. Trust. A positive work environment always is based on trust. And how do you build trust in an office? Yeah, and that's a great, how do you earn it?
Listening and following through.
You listen, follow through, you do what you say you're going to do.
You also don't tell everything you know.
Confidentiality is another way that you build trust. I call this the 2 C's, confidentiality and consistency. What you say you're going to do, you do. Who you say you are and what you say you represent, your behavior reflects that. So you're consistent. Your words are consistent with your behavior and you're confidential. Okay, that's critical in building trust. And if your people don't trust you, I mean, that's kind of like the foundation of the house. You know, I've gone to do seminars, and I may have told y'all this before, but at the end I'll hand out evaluations, and this is at different companies. And I mean, I can always tell what companies have issues of trust because they'll look up and they'll go, now, who's going to read this? Before they complete their evaluations. And they're petrified. And to me, that is such a red flag at any place of work where people are hindered to give feedback. People are afraid to share anything. Well, they don't trust where that information's going or how that person's going to receive it. So trust is huge. Communication. And y'all have talked about this a little bit already, but to be a good listener, a good team is somebody that not only tells people things, but asks people for feedback. And they don't run from negativity. They don't run from negative feedback. They see that as another way to learn. Then we need to work on this. But once again, it kind of gets back to that security issue. Very secure people aren't afraid to hear the good and the bad. But insecure people don't like to hear anything that's negative. But part of being a good communicator is that feedback both ways, communicating, letting people know what your expectations are, your values, what are your values, what's important to you. All of that is very, very important. And you've got to create an atmosphere of open communication. Let me ask you, how do you create an atmosphere of open communication where people know that they can talk? What are things that you do on a daily basis that let people know you're open to that?
When you talk about it, you look them in the eye, you listen.
Eye contact, listening, open door, availability.
I go to them and just ask.
And I love that. Andrew, you mentioned that last time we had a seminar, is that you don't necessarily wait for people to come to you. You'll kind of walk around, you'll go to someone's office and you'll specifically ask them. You don't wait for them to come to you. I love that. You're intentional about it. Okay? So communication is huge. And also, when someone brings up something negative, like in a staff meeting, you don't shoot them down. Because they're watching. If you go, what? Why would you ask that? Do you think anybody else is going to ask a question? So it's, how you model what it is that you say. That's a great question. That's going to be challenging, but I'm glad you brought that up. Well, then I'm not going to be afraid to let you know if something's going wrong, because I can tell by the way you treated that person, you're not going to trample me if I bring that up. So you've got to model that for people. So communication, expectations is huge. This is what I expect from our team. This is what I expect when it comes to our work environment. And expectations goes both ways. Once again, this isn't manager to the people, it's also people to the manager. This is what I expect of you as my supervisor. So it always goes both ways, right? And something that I always do whenever I hire a new student worker, new GA in my office, I always sit down with them and I give them an index card and I say, what are your expectations of me as your supervisor? And I let them write them down and share them with me. And then I turn around to them and go, these are my expectations of you working for this office. Two-way communication. Because most of the time we let people know our expectations when they haven't met them, when they screw up. And we want to be proactive. We don't want to be reactive. Okay, so sharing those expectations. Team spirit, we've already talked a little bit about this, but building a team of cooperation versus competition. How do you build people to work together versus to compete? What are some things that you can do to build a team spirit? Anybody?
I think sharing successes.
Yeah, go around at a staff meeting and kind of give everybody a high five or ask, hey, has anybody have a student story this week or a success story this week? Or, Jason, you talked about just accomplishing this goal. So the very next time you have a meeting, y'all, I just want to affirm once again, well done. well done, here's what you did, and just kind of a reminder. I don't know about y'all, but if you ever go over to the Hyper and you get on that treadmill, you keep looking down to see how far you've gone. I was recently out of town and I got on this treadmill and it had a selection where you could choose a visual where it looks like you're running a track, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. But then the next visual was a mountain. And I'm thinking, oh, it'll show that I'm climbing the mountain. And I thought, well, that'll motivate me on the treadmill. So I pushed mountain, okay? Well, I get on it and I'm going. Well, what happens is instead of going up the mountain, the line just goes across the base of the mountain. And then as you do another lap, it just goes back. So you literally, you're working out on the treadmill and all you see is this line going back and forth on the base. And I'm like, yee-haw. And it was so demotivating because all I felt like is I was just going back and forth. Some of our people in the office just feel like we're going back and forth. I need to see what I'm working toward. I need to see how far I've come. So reminding each other, y'all, look how far we've come since August. Look at how much we've accomplished since last week. And communicating that to people to build up that camaraderie. Celebrations together, whether it's a potluck, whether it's birthdays, whether it's, hey, we survived the academic year. I always thought that on the last day of finals, everybody as an employee we ought to have a party. Okay, we just finished the academic year 2011-12, yeehaw, and do something to celebrate. So team spirit. I've also been on campuses where on Halloween, all the offices dressed in costume, and the students loved it. It was just fun, and it pulls people together within that office setting, or April Fool's Day doing something fun. So picking times of the year just to kind of pull people together when there's a lot of energy, or when you can identify that the energy is low and you need to try to pull it up. The next one's recognition. Y'all mentioned this, and that's to just recognize people for what it is they're doing and how they're contributing. And that's just simply catching people doing good. Thank you for taking care of that email, or thank you for responding to that person on the phone and sending that information out. I mean, it's just looking, and it doesn't have to be monumental, huge. A lot of times we wait for the big things, and it's literally the everyday little things, and just acknowledging people for that. Assuming responsibility, y'all have already mentioned this, is that And what this is as a leader, you assume responsibility for the bad and you share responsibility for the good. That's the rule of thumb for a leader. Assume responsibility for the bad, share responsibility for the good. Okay? If you're getting a call because a student, if I'm getting a call because a student told somebody the wrong time for a seminar, I apologize. I'm sorry. Let me sign you up for another seminar. I'm not going to sit there and rat out on the student. Well, the student told you. Well, that doesn't make me look any better, and it certainly doesn't make the student look any better. So just assume responsibility. I'm that person's manager, supervisor. I'm going to assume responsibility for that. But, if somebody comes up and brags on a student worker, oh, they were so helpful, then I'm going to let everybody know that. So assume responsibility for the bad, share responsibility for the good. Approachability, y'all have already brought this up. It is so important that in that office we have an environment where people can talk to one another and be civil to one another, and not only receive the good, but also receive the bad. We can have a communication about that, and we can learn from it. So approachability is huge. The physical environment, I will never forget when I went over to the College of Business when they moved into their new building, and I was walking around seeing Jan and all these different people out, and they're like, I've got a window, and I've got plants, and I've got, and the same, it was just amazing.
Over there and said, you have a window.
Exactly, just the mental, and it's the same thing when HR moved to Wingo, and I'd go over there and talk to all my HR friends, Charlotte, look, and moving from Torreston West, and a lot of them were on the internal part of the building that was just concrete, and now they're in Wingo. It was amazing, the attitude difference.
It's depressing for us to walk through the College of Business building.
Oh, it's just amazing, isn't it? So what can you do where you currently are? Are there neat pictures? Like I go to Matilda's office. I love Matilda's office. Her artwork. She has a throw on the back of her chair. I was sitting there going, this is so nice. It's just a very pleasant workspace, okay? So work with what you have and think about plants. Think about artwork. Think about posting some of those notes. But how can you make what space you have positive? Okay, that really makes it may even be the color of paint. I'll never forget when I was given my office, everybody had taupe. I'm like, I am sick of taupe. My office is blue, it's sky blue. In fact, Suzanne, you noticed that. It makes me happy. It matches nothing else in the office, but I don't care. I feel like I'm in a little cloud when I'm at work, okay? So think about your physical environment, positive feedback, and what I mean on that is just that that you provide opportunities for people to evaluate what's going on. And that shouldn't happen once a year in performance evaluations or once a year, but regularly at staff meetings, you know, how we doing? You know, I read this one article, and this was amazing. This large company made every employee once a week send in a 2-paragraph report. You had to condense it. And I don't know what size company this was, but every week they had to send in this report. Is what went well this week, what did not go well this week, you know, what's going on. And this CEO or a manager read all of those and then sent an email out Monday morning, kudos to, based on what he heard went well, and then the response to, based on your feedback on this, here's what we're going to do regarding that issue. So people weren't slammed for sharing the negative. It was received, it was evaluated, and all right, what are we going to do now? Or I'm going to have a meeting now based on this, based on what you've told me. Approachability. Do you hear insecurity in there at all? I hear leadership. But I thought, what a great, so maybe that's something you could do once a month. As far as in financial accounts, what this month, what's gone well, what's been an issue, and creating just some form of feedback for people to send in by email or by written form, and then taking it from there. So positive feedback and making your office fun. And let me also I want to throw in one more thing when it comes to feedback. Do any of y'all do evaluations with people? Okay, I want to just give you 4 questions that you need to ask your employees if you're doing evaluations with people. Okay, this is back on positive feedback. Just 4 questions that would be real helpful when you're meeting with people. Number 1, what skills would you like to develop? What skills do you want to develop? Second question, what new knowledge would you like to gain in the next 6 months? What new knowledge would you like to gain in the next 6 months? And so if that may mean that you pair them up with somebody else in the office that already has that knowledge. Maybe it means you send them to a local conference. Maybe it means that you give them that responsibility. So what new knowledge? Third question, what would you like to do differently? What would you like to do differently in your current position? And you may all of a sudden hear of a better way to do what they're doing. So is there anything you would like to do differently with your current position? And the last question is, how can I assist you in the process of your development? How can I assist you in the process of your development in this current position? Now, if you're my manager or supervisor and you ask me those things, all I'm going to hear from you is, you trust me, you're validating me, you respect me, you're wanting me to be better. And that's what you're doing when you ask those kind of open-ended questions. Fun, I'm just going to throw out some things real quick and then I want to go to the exercise. Fun, have a lunch once a month. Have a lunch once a month where you order pizzas, and everybody knows on this day, it's like the second Tuesday of every month, there's pizza in the break room, period. No strings attached. And just see if people show up, and just whoever does, you talk, you visit, huh?
And who pays for that?
Well, one idea that I heard, and this is pretty funny, is you have a complaint jar, and anytime you overhear somebody gripe or complain, they have to put a quarter in this bucket. And then at the end of the month, all the change from the complaint and gripe bucket pays for the pizza.
Okay.
So that's one suggestion I heard, especially if you don't have the money. Have a fun committee in your office where you just get a group of people together and they come up with ideas of what kind of things would just make your work environment more fun. Hire fun people. Make sure when you're interviewing people that you pick people that kind of fit the culture of the office. Have a humorous bulletin board. When every time you see something, a funny cartoon, a funny article, a picture that just makes you smile, you just have a place to post humorous things so that people can see that and it makes them smile. Have a tension release area. Now, some of us don't even have a break room, but just if you have a little area that you have those balls that you squeeze or rubber bands, or you just have, you know, a place where people can go and scream and let off steam. Dress up days, I've already mentioned this, but like Ugly Tie Day, Halloween, April Fool's Day, Tax Day, just tell people to dress up silly. The Christmas, you know, in the holidays and the Christmas, when everybody had an opportunity to decorate their offices, that's a way to build team spirit. That's a way to make work fun. And, you know, there were several offices that did that this past December, but, you know, encourage those type of things because that's an outlet for a lot of our people. Photos, ask everyone to bring a photo of themselves when they were a child and then post those somewhere and see if people can guess who is who. And then leave them up for a week or so. It brings attention to your people. It's funny. Share at a staff meeting, share a funny or an embarrassing moment in your life. And do one person at each staff meeting. Just, you know, do a drum roll and say, okay, and have cards with everybody's names on it. Pick one and say, okay, Matilda, it's your week. Share a funny or embarrassing story. And Matilda that day is in the limelight. It gets everybody laughing, and then you move on, okay? Just small steps to build camaraderie. Decorate your office. Post quotes. I love to walk by Hank's office every week to see what quote Hank has in his office posted in the window. And it's just something that kind of inspires you and puts a lift in your steps. So just things to make fun. All right, now here's what I'm going to do. We're going to come back to this because I want to close with the gorilla exercise, but I want to go ahead and get you to fill in the blanks, okay, with this. What if you do not work in a positive work environment, and how do you get other people on board? Like you go back and you're excited about this, but everybody's like, oh yeah, great. You know, one more thing we got to work on. First of all, and fill in the blanks on your handout. You should have this right under there, how to change an organization's culture. First of all, it's cognitive. People have to understand why there needs to be a change. So what that means is you really sit down with the people in your office and go, you know what? This is just a really stressful place to work. Or I've noticed that several of us, and don't say, I've noticed you've got a bad attitude. Okay, that don't work. I've just noticed that several of us, there's just some attitudes, there's just some issues, and you have to be diplomatic with the way you bring it up, but you've got to get other people on board on why we need to work on this. Okay, why? Maybe you just share, you know, we've got a reputation on campus for just not being real friendly. And be blunt. Or we've got a reputation, or, you know, I just find it challenging sometimes in here because we're always on the treadmill and we never really step back to reflect on what we've accomplished. So just share and be honest, but people have to have an understanding of why you need the change. Limited resources, and Penny already mentioned that. Sometimes it's hard because we want this to happen, but we don't have the resources to make it happen. So you have to kind of look at the big picture, and maybe it means shifting the resources that you do have. Maybe you have resources on something that really makes a little difference to your office, but it's a large amount of money, and maybe you can shift that to something that wouldn't cost as much but would make a big impact. So kind of looking at your resources and seeing where you can put them to impact. The third one is the motivation. People have to want to change. So an example of this is that, like, y'all, we really need to work on our customer service. And they're all like, well, the next time somebody calls that's furious, let that person answer the phone. And then once they get off the phone with that angry person, they're like, wow, you're right, Charlotte, we really need to work on our customer service. But why? Because they've just experienced it. A lot of times people aren't motivated to change or do anything until they have experienced why that change is necessary. Okay, so looking for opportunities that people can experience it. The politics, that's reality for us. A lot of these things we want to do or make happen, but they can't. And sometimes we present an idea, we go to someone, and we're shot down before we even finish the sentence. So just know that that's part of the challenge. Okay, so here's some practical things that you can do. Number one is the tipping point. What does that mean? If you go back to your office, who is someone, and it's not always the person with the title. A lot of times it's someone that doesn't have a title. But who is someone in your work environment that has a great deal of influence in your work environment? Other people listen to this person. That's who you get on board first. That's who you approach and say, you know what, I really want to work on the culture of our office. What are some ways we can approach our supervisor? What are some ways? So identifying the person of influence and getting them on your team to help make the suggestions, okay? Sometimes they're the sharks, and sometimes it means embracing a shark. But if you get a shark on your team, wow. So it may mean literally going to the last person you want to go to, but yet it's the person you need to go to. So convincing them, and that's what the tipping point is. Experience harsh realities. Help the person experience why the change is needed, and this is kind of going back to what I talked about with that motivation. You've got to help them realize why it's important to help improve the culture. People want to have fun. People want to enjoy their job. So you've got to help convince them the reality, if we don't change things, we're going to continue to have turnover. If we don't change things, people are going to dread coming to work. If we don't change, and you've got to help them understand that, okay? Redistribute the resources. We've talked about that. Moving those resources from one aspect to another. And I love this, and that is trying to identify an insider that can kind of look at this with fresh eyes and kind of give you suggestions or pointers that can kind of come to you and go, you know what, Charlotte? I've noticed that this person is kind of the ringleader. I've noticed, and they can kind of give you inside information to help you in changing that environment, okay? And there can be objective. So what I want you to do is in teams of 2 or 3, I want you to read the gorilla exercise. We're going to close with that. And that's kind of at the very bottom. What if one of the gorillas asked, what's going on? That's basically what's the courage to go, why do we do this? Because none of the original gorillas are even there. Because it's just that learned behavior from the culture. And it was learned and passed on and passed on and passed on. And then somebody walks in that's new and objective and goes like, what? And have you ever been in a situation where you do make a suggestion, you do ask a question, and instead of getting just a response, you're verbally beaten or attacked? I mean, somebody just goes off. That's another thing, is they didn't kind of pull the gorilla away. They literally attacked any gorilla that went toward those stairs based on.
How could they?
Yeah. To me, there's a lot of relevance here in the workplace, is how we assimilate to our culture and then we just keep things the same. And sometimes we communicate that to our employees, sometimes we don't. I just think, you know, what if all the other gorillas cheered and supported that first gorilla that was trying to make an attempt to do that? This is a fun way to just start with gorillas, but really get into some issues that may be going on within the office. And this is another one that you can do at a staff meeting or with a group of individuals in your office, just to have a discussion about change, suggestions, feedback, how important feedback is, you know, the good and the bad, and refraining from attacking people in the process. I recently was at Kimberly-Clark, and we had done this as an exercise with a group of people that were having some conflict within their team. And I mean, this turned into a 2-hour discussion. It was amazing how it just started that ball to move when it came to conflicts. I guess one of the things that I asked myself, and truthfully the last few days as I was pulling all this together, is Charlotte, what are you doing to help create a positive work environment? You know, what are you doing to really make a difference when it comes to the people that you see on a daily basis? And that's where we start. Well, thank y'all for being here. I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful, and just hang in there, y'all. You're doing a good job.